All right, well, welcome everybody to another Microvellum Live episode here. We are broadcasting from the Microvellum headquarters here in Central Point, Oregon. So thank you so much for joining in on the conversation today. We are going to be having a great conversation today. We're actually going to be speaking with a couple different people, Tyler Cerny of Strata Design, as well as Brandon Wright and J.W. Moore from Merchant Fixtures. And so we're going to be having a discussion about a topic that's been on the minds of a lot of people for actually probably a very long time. There's been some recent discussion even on the AWI community for those of you who are following that. And the topic's going to be about nested-based manufacturing versus cell-based manufacturing. And so here with us to help lead that discussion with these two companies is Ralph Butler, one of our account reps out of the Virginia area. Thanks for being here, Ralph.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So before we get into this discussion here with Tyler, Brandon, and JW, let's chat for a bit. I know you've participated quite a bit in these live events, these live episodes that we've been having for the last, 7 months or so, it seems like. But I think those listening might gain a little bit of information or would like to know a little bit more about you and maybe your background and how you started in the woodworking industry.
Well, I started in about 2000, went to work for a company in Richmond, Virginia, and worked primarily in millwork. And I would occasionally get involved in casework, and we used a program there called Microvellum. And the only time I ever dealt with Microvellum was when I did the casework. And after a while of being at this particular company, I went to work at Merchant's Fixture, where Brandon and JW are. In fact, they were there while I was there. And I worked in engineering there, and they had been using Microvellum, and they got an upgrade to a newer version. I got a little bit of more training, and I began to use the program there. And so I began in about 2000 working primarily with Merchant's Fixture and with the Millwork Specialist, TMS, in Richmond, Virginia. In 2005, I became a technician and traveled around company to company, training and integrating the software. And I did that up until 2013, became an account manager, and just last year, an account exec.
Awesome. Yeah, so you've been around the block or two. I remember our days in support when you would call in, and those were good times.
I remember those days.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think one of the things, too, I want to get going here fairly soon here, just so that we can kind of take a poll on the audience, those that we have here listening. I'd like to see what their manufacturing process is right now. So in just a moment, those of you tuned in here will be in the Zoom platform. We'll be able to take this survey real fast. So I'm going to launch this poll. And so, Ralph, while that's going, I think we should probably get into having a chat here with Strata Design and Merchant Fixtures.
Sounds good. So, hi, Tyler. How are you?
Unmute myself here. Doing great. Thanks, Ralph.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Thanks for coming. And it's good to see you, Brandon and JW.
You too, Ralph.
You too, Ralph.
So I mentioned earlier that that I worked at Merchants. Back in the day, we had a beam saw and a point-to-point. And since that time, you guys have adopted the use of a nested-based router. And Tyler, I know that you use both in your operation. And I'm curious, Brandon, do you guys types of machining? The machine cell is the beam saw point-to-point, commonly referred to as machine cell manufacturing, and the nested base, we use the nested router, and then other things to complement your machining practices. But what do you do? Do you guys still maintain the use of the point-to-point?
No, that has been long gone.
Okay, so you completely made a transition over to nested-based manufacturing, but you still use your beam saw, don't you?
We do for large sheets of laminate and solid surface.
Okay, so you utilize that. Got you. Tyler, you're different in that you still maintain the use of both of those. So can you tell us a little bit about what you do on those?
I would say it's similar to Brandon and how you guys are managing it, except we do we still have our pod and rail machine. It doesn't get used much at all. I've kind of held on to it for a little bit here as backup over the last year. We just acquired the nested machine within the last year, but right now we actually send out to both. Anything that doesn't get machining, half-inch material, we do our backs, drawer parts out of half-inch. And then the drawer parts also go to we have a vertical machining center that is nice to grab the small little drawer box parts. And so that's kind of the flow. We also do cut our solid surface. You can see a picture of our plant here. We do cut our solid surface on our beam saw, a lot of it. If there is some machining or curb parts, that'll go over to the nested base router.
Understood. So I see your router has a loading and an offload table on it, and it's in line with on a conveyor system with that edge banding machine. And then across the walkway over there, I see you've got a beam saw in the back and then vertical machine.
Yeah, so when we implemented the nested cell, the nested machine at the beginning of last year, we got rid of box bins. You do see a box bin, but that's a dust bin that they're moving there in the picture for the dust bags. But for the most part, we got rid of box bins, and now it moves on conveyor. So at that time, we moved pretty much every piece of equipment except the saw, and then you can see the flow off the saw on a conveyor to the BHX, or the vertical machining center we have, and then off the nested router. You can see as it rolls down to the edge bander. We do have, but not in the picture here, another bander that we will sometimes divert parts over to that via backup, or if it's set up for 3 mil or certain jobs, it's nice to set up both and run that. Wrapping up with the dowel inserter here at the very end.
Looks like you have a really nice layout, a good workflow. How's those conveyors? How has that worked to help you organize your work and to improve your flow?
Well, I think one of the big things is it's taken out a whole day of WIP, work in process, has been a big thing. The other big thing is also just the fact that people aren't searching for a pallet jack to move, to then go and move a box bin around, bending over to work on parts, pull parts in and out of a box bin. So just also as a ergonomic feature, that's also been really nice to be able to not have the staff have to bend over and grab parts out of a box bin or off the floor.
That's good. A lot of advantages to that.
Yeah.
So before I jump back over to Brandon and JW, let me ask you another question. What was the main driving factor, maybe you said it and I might have missed it, in going toward the nested base machine? What made you go that direction?
You asking me, Ralph?
Yeah.
One was, I think we recognized that we could get better quality part. You can see our old Bucelato jet out there. There's some tiredness in that machine. I'd say our cabinets are better quality cabinets in the fit and function. So that was one. Also just the age of our machine. Could we have gone new? Yeah, but we probably would have gone new on both a saw and a pod and rail or another machine of that nature in order to, get a machine that's going to last, continue to last for us. We were starting to see maintenance issues creep up. I'm a guy who likes a little redundancy too. We have 2 edge banders. When one goes down, we have a backup. Now we have 3 CNCs with the vertical machining center, but we didn't have a backup for the saw. With the nested router, we actually have a backup. If the router goes down, we have the saw and the vertical. Again, if the saw goes down, we can still process parts on the router. So I like a little redundancy.
Sounds good. That's smart. So Brandon and JW, let me ask you guys about some of your strategy. You made a complete conversion. You're not running a mixed or a hybrid setup. You completely went to the nested base, and I know Tyler's headed that way, but we've got a picture of your shop floor layout too, I think. About why you made that change and how it's worked out for you and what you're doing to get a better workflow and better throughput.
We were at the point with our old point to point where it was nickel and diming us so bad. It was probably one of the first ever made. It was, I think we bought it in 2097. So we could same as Tyler, if it had to be replaced and it wasn't worth keeping, probably not. So we just figured we should just,
We also thought about it, with cutting on a saw, handling all the parts coming off the saw, and then putting them all back on the pod and rail. One operation, cutting out
Yeah, there's one less body.
one less body.
So material handling, that having to handle that part over and over and over again. Has it affected your throughput? Are you able to do as much work with the nested base router as you were able to do with the beam saw and the point-to-point?
I think so, but I think what really affected our throughput was when we changed how we manufacture. We, back when you were there and for up until maybe 5 years ago, we used to cut jobs and put them on those carts. They weren't even those carts, they were flat stack carts, and we would just wheel in front of a man and say, here's your shop drawings, here's your parts, and go. And having gone to just a manufacturing cell is what I think really sped us up. The machine definitely helped, but I think what allowed the machine to really start singing was that everything downstream got out of the way, if that makes sense.
Yep, it does. So are there any drawbacks that you see to let's put it this way. Are there any negatives that you've experienced once you've gone to the nested base and you don't have the point-to-point? I know you're using that beam saw. What are the strategies you're using for the beam saw? I know you mentioned it a little bit, but are all the parts like in what Tyler said that have no machining go there, or just some of them?
Anything that's got to be cut offline if we have to remake a part. If it's just a simple shelf or a door or something, it can be cut on the beam saw. The solid surface guys will take a cut list and go to the beam saw. And that's pretty much it, unless someone's got a 12-foot piece of laminate. It's just a lot easier to have to roll up one side and feed it through a table saw than just put it on the beam saw and rip it.
So pretty much in engineering, everything goes to the nested base router as much as you can.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely, everything.
Yeah, that saw it's just a convenience now.
I'm going to ask you one more question. I'm going to hop over to Tyler. So there were things, we did fixtures when I was there, and I know you still do, and there were some curved parts and desk and things like that we did. So have you found it any easier to do parts on the router than you did on the point-to-point JW? What do you think about that?
Yeah, certain parts are much easier because it's, you're cutting them out of one sheet, and it's truer. This machine's a whole lot more accurate. It may not have been the effect that the pod and rail was inaccurate. It's just, something was always going on with it.
One of the things that I've noticed at both companies, at TMS and at Merchants, that the saw builds up a lot of harmonics and stuff. And I've seen a lot of saw blades come through the shop to try to cure different ills on the saw. And that seemed to be one of the issues that saws face. And I think a lot of people have struggled with that. I'll get back to you in a minute. Tyler, let me ask you a question. On the types of products that you build, are there any limitations that that people would experience as far as, or things that you think types of products that you build are better designed or to work on one system versus the other?
Yeah, I would say Strata's evolved. When I bought Strata Design 10 years ago, it was really, what color laminate did you want? And that was the only question. So we did a lot of schools, public schools, and we've evolved. And as we've evolved and through the recession had to take on more work, healthcare work, that type of work in hospitals look more and more like hotels. They all want it by phase, by floor, this area bundled nicely in this package. And so, back in the day when we were shipping or manufacturing large lots of material, 100 cabinet lots at a time, and sending that out to the saw, and it was, we're cutting floor to ceiling, a stack of product in a day on the beam saw, then I think that lends itself. And plus then the pod and rail, you're setting it up once you do a setup, and you're gonna be you're going to beat it all day. I think as far as volume production with a lot of the same cabinets, and I think there's definitely a place for that. And we sometimes will run, when we get a job like that has a lot of the same. I mean, we'll stack it 5 high and run it through the other way. You're not going to beat the production of a beam saw cutting 5 high on a pod and rail with minimal setup. But now, once you start to drive these hospital projects that are small little, 30 to 50 cabinet lots that you want to do, the vertical machining center with the saw is it good because of the 0 setup time. And then I think that the nested base router, we figured we were cutting on average 30 to 60 sheets a day on our saw, and that's, not really pushing it, but because of the cutting 1 to 2 high, a lot of times now on a router, I think that we're routing the same amount on a router and on our, with a little part-time person on the saw, and it's working out nice.
Awesome. So there may be people out there that are listening that have, they may be job shops. They do a high volume of components, and they may be able to stack repeated parts or patterns on multiple sheets that would benefit from cutting parts out on a saw and then machining them on a rail and pod, especially if they're running a pendulum operation where they can just keep that machine running and running and running. Perhaps they're flat stacking them and shipping them out and things like that. But when you're getting into these things that are more specialized, and when they're in smaller work orders or smaller batches of work in progress, then this nested base thing lends itself pretty good to that. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think that there's a place for if you're cutting on average more than 1.5 high, we were about 1.5. Is the stack height that we would average. Yeah, we had jobs that it was 3 to 5, but most of them were that 1 to 2. And I would say that if you look at a router, you're going to save labor and on it.
Well, thanks. I hear what you're saying. I kind of see that as well. Brandon, when you and I first started talking about implementing our ERP process at your plant, one of the things I noticed is that you spent a tremendous amount of time out in the shop taking notes, doing time studies. You guys rearranged your shop floor, your workflow. You gave a lot of thought to that. Are there any considerations that people need to take when they go to, let's say, move from a beam saw point to point to a nested base router? Are there some things that you wish you had done, or some things that people need to think about when they're thinking about going in that direction that you've learned?
At the time, no, but right now, I kind of wish we had horizontal boring capability. We have an OMAL, like I saw in Tyler's shop, and we currently only use it for its 8mm dowels. And we can't use that with 1/2-inch material, which is what we're going to be getting into when we build AWI specific stuff. You can't use an 8mm dowel with 1/2-inch material. If anyone knows how to do it, please let me know. But I wish we still had the capability of putting a part on there and just having the head come in and punch in 2 holes for the drawer with a 5mm hole for a little dowel. But we know
that's what we use our vertical for. So we'll take those drawer boxes with the small dowel and drill for that on the vertical machining center, which is nice. And
so how do you do it on the horizontal?
It has a horizontal head on the vertical machining center, so it'll pop the hole in there for the 5mm dowel.
Yeah.
Because we don't have. I know some dowel inserters have dual feeds, but ours does not.
Ours doesn't either.
Yeah.
So that's something people need to think about.
We have improvised when we make, so we do a lot of retail, as you know, Ralph, and we do adjustable shelving with product stops on it for like a cash wrap or a candy bar or something like that. We, instead of cutting 2 parts and nailing it and gluing it and all this and making the product stop, we got a 45-degree bit and ran a groove and just broke it, ran some glue in there and folded it. So we're getting kind of, I don't think that's too crafty or whatever, but we're getting smart with how we have to use it. With our limitations, we're looking at different heads and different bits and stuff like that. We got a Zeta, the Lamello, the really cool Clamex biscuits. We cannot use our router with that. We have to figure that out. But I know they make a head, but I think it's 5-axis specific. Is that right?
Could be aggregate maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Tyler, what about you? When I noticed you got a loading table and an offload table. That takes up quite a bit of real estate. What are some of the considerations that people should really think about if they've got a small shop in there? Look, because I know in my past, I've always thought that the nested-based manufacturing centers took less of a footprint than it did with the machine cell because you had two pieces of equipment with that.
Mhm.
But today, I mean, my thought is, from my experience, that one of the best ways to improve throughput on a nested-based machine is to have an offload table so you can get the parts off and start cutting another part while you're labeling. But that takes up extra room, doesn't it? What do you think about that as far as some of the considerations that need to be thought about before you go to that direction?
Yeah, I think I think a must-have is an offload table, because then it allows you to shove the work gets pushed off onto your offload table. You can then throw a fresh sheet on while you go and take care, after the fresh sheet is being machined, you can go take care of the parts that are on your conveyor, or it doesn't even need to be a conveyor. It could be just a platform or a sheet that gets the work gets pushed off onto. I think because of our volume, and I saw that I wanted the machine to kind of drive the operator more than the operator driving the machine. That's why we went with the automated onload offload. It doesn't have a label. I know labeling is an option. I didn't feel that I wanted to hop on that technology or possibly that challenge. So we just have a labeling machine on the back end of a conveyor as the parts come off the conveyor. I think it's then it has a screenshot, Microvellum screenshot of where that nest was, the parts are, and then it gets labeled from there. And that's working pretty well. The operator it's not full time on the nest or on the nested router, so they can hop over, run the BHX a little bit, possibly hop over on the edge bander and do a little bit of that. But you do want with a machine like that that's dragging sheets on, you want to make sure they've got their eyes on it when it's pulling stuff on.
Does your operator load the table up for the loading table, or do you have somebody else that's a material handler that does that? How do you handle that?
He's back there in the photo. You can see it's back by the saw, so that part-time saw operator will and can load that bunk of material on for that operator.
Okay.
It's a big piece of machinery. Ours is a 5x12 table, so you've got a 5x12 onload because we do solid surface. You got a 5x12 table and a 5x12 offload, so it's a large piece of real estate that it takes up. And we were fortunate we have that piece of real estate to be able to do that. We've got the plant that you're looking at here is with office is around 18,000 square feet with office. And so we are fortunate to have a large amount of, large footprint here. And that lends itself nice to those longer tables. But you can see he's even kind of, there's some, those are his dust bins that are in the walkway there, going in between the saw and the router.
Yeah, you got about a 36-foot worth of machine sitting there you've got to have room for. And, that's pretty cool the way you've got them. I'm assuming you've got 12-foot to load, you got 12-foot to operate, and you got 12-foot offload, something like that.
Yeah, and then you got some space for the operator there on the end, where he's grabbing the parts, putting them on the conveyor. I think key, and if you're going with an automated system, key is dust collection. We don't have much issues with dust collection. You do see a little bit of dust there on the floor after running all day, and he's cleaning up. But it's key because then as the sweep action's happening, you've got a clean table there. And so we have the largest in-house single dedicated dust collection system you can hook up to that can be inside a building. So that's been beneficial for us to not have to worry about the dust as much.
With that large system, that largest you can hook up inside a building, are you still having to blow your sheets off, the spool board off before you load a sheet? It's just, no. It's clean. It's
yep.
just, oh, good. Awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people over the years have struggled with things, and I know that a lot of people that are looking at nested-based manufacturing, they've heard all the stories about moving parts and all this other kind of thing. What are your recommendations? And I'll jump to you guys in just a second, Brandon, on this whole thing with vacuum pumps. I mean, I know that I've seen shops where they have they have two big vacuum pumps and no problems. And I see people where they cut corners and parts are moving on them all the time. You see people painting the edges of the spoil board and doing all that kind of thing. So there are some things that you're going to learn when you get these machines. What kind of things like that have you run into, Tyler?
Our machine is, I think the Wiki's a little unique in the industry that it has 4 vacuum pumps, smaller vacuum pumps on it that it does go into a chamber, but then that chamber can be broken up into different zones. So if you are running a lot of smaller parts, maybe we have a zone set up for solid surface. So if you're running that sheet, it may not need all 4 vacuum pumps pulling on there. So it cycles those vacuum pumps in and out. To be honest, I haven't really been monitoring how much it shuts those down. That is a feature that they say is an advantage of the Wiki Vantech that allows those pumps to cycle down. But I have been a little frustrated with the fact that it doesn't like holding, if you're running a whole lot of die-wall sections, smaller parts, as you start to route those out, it's not going to hold that down without doing some tabbing or some other features on there. So it's not like this, beautiful section of nested, all cut out die-wall parts is going to come spitting off the back there. It's not. There's too much that, and I don't know if somebody else with, the big vacuums, the big dual vacuums, if they have issues with that or not. That might be a question for the group. But with our machine, if you put a whole section of smaller parts, you will have challenges.
Yeah, I think that's something everybody faces, especially if it's plywood. What about you guys, Brandon? What do you guys do to handle that kind of thing? And you running into issues that you'd like to tell us about?
Ours also has 4 pumps, and whenever, I'll let Jay speak to this, but I'm pretty sure that what we do is we step down how much material we're going to chew out of it. Is that all right?
Yeah, we leave a thin layer, like you said, the die-wall parts, they get kicked off there a lot, even when we do that. Ours is as well a Vantech. But for the most part, as long as it's got a little bit of length to it, we leave a paper-thin layer to it till the last cut, and still we'll get the occasional kickoff, or plywood if it's got any kind of warping. It doesn't want to be vacuumed down, correct?
So you guys use onion skin on the Microvellum tool file setting?
Yes.
Okay. You use tabs at all? I heard Tyler said he uses tabs. Do you use tabs ever at all?
Every once in a while we might. Sometimes we'll put a piece of tape on it.
Okay. Yep, I hear you.
Forgive me, I'm not your Microvellum guru, but wasn't there some recent upgrade or feature that was added for tabbing? Am I correct?
We have tabbing. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Clark.
so I was going to say right now what we have is a feature that you can, there's several different options. So you can do the onion skinning where you can set your minimum part length or part area, and the system's going to go through and take care of that. And Ralph, I think, can go in and show those settings later when he gets into kind of a tour of the software. But so there's those options for onion skinning. And then there's also other things that we have for manual placement of tabs. And that's been around for a very long time. But what we have now that's coming out, and we're going to be showcasing that on one of these live episodes here coming up here soon, is a way to auto tab. And so that works out really well. And it's not just tabbing that's going to be working with our stay down nesting as well as our common line cut nest as well. So that's, and as well as the just standard nesting as well. So that feature is coming out soon, and it's going to be one that's going to be great, I think, for you guys to get a hold of.
Is that going to work with true shape nesting?
Yes, it will.
Okay.
Yeah, I've seen that in action, and I can tell you from my days in support that people have been wanting that for a very long time, and we have it, and it's going to be great to get that implemented.
When's it? Do you have any idea when it's coming out?
I don't know exactly when it's coming out. We'll probably be able to get a file or an update here coming at the TechCon event around that time period, which is going to be May 3rd and 4th. So for those of you who come out there, you're going to get to see how all these new features work, and you'll even get to play with that new version. But I think we're going to wait till then till we have that hot fix available. So it'll be working with our new. I'm kind of spilling the beans here of some of the stuff that we're working on, but we have a new integrated post processor that we call it. It's an IPP type of tool file, and that's how the auto tabbing is tied into that tool. And I ran tests myself the other day on that, and I went from processing of a nest. I think it took around 140 seconds for all the sheets that I was working on, down to 13 seconds. So
Wow.
huge time savings. And I can't wait to show that off, but I've got to keep the lid on it for a little bit longer while we get it all wrapped up.
So the auto tabbing is coming out with the IPP. It won't be available in the old Excel tool file.
Right. It's totally, it's a new breed. It's a new thing. It's a new algorithm that we've developed exclusively for that auto tabbing so it's tied to that IPP.
I heard Brandon say something a minute ago about aggregate head functionality, and that's also tied to the IPP. So there's a number of things or functionalities that we're realizing over this IPP change, this change to the IPP type of tool file. It's an integrated tool file. It's part of the program. It's not an external file. So that's coming in, but it's an upgrade if you have an existing tool file. Brandon, I know that you and I were talking about, offloading parts and pieces. I've seen this before in other places. You guys have a technique that you use to get parts off of the machine too, rather than just labeling it on machine. There's something you're thinking about putting in place, or you put in place?
We have thought about it over and over. It just keeps getting put on the back burner, but we were going to make just a homemade table on a little bit of an angle on some casters and get a big pole and maybe a boom or something and sweep it off and roll it out of the way. I sent a picture of our
Your shop?
we're really limited on the sides as well as the front because of the vacuum boom that we use to load the machine. So we don't have that much space, and in order to do something like that, we'd have to probably really choke up the workspace in front and wheel out of the way and kind of rearrange how there we are. So I don't know if you can see beyond that white or the yellow fence there's a fire door which we cannot block, and then right beyond that is all that scrap. In front of that is the beam saw. So we've got about 5 feet that way, and you can see the boom right there. There's not much space.
And our bander is just to the left of the wiki, so we couldn't come down that way either.
Well, it sounds to me like that, and I'm not picking on you when I say this, but I'm saying that when you're thinking about, for anybody that hadn't already put one on the shop floor, when you're thinking about how to arrange your shop around this type of equipment, I was noticing Tyler's, man, it's really sweet how he's got that whole length of the shop lined out in front of that machine like that. To have the end of it open is something that's worth thinking about. That's cool.
Yeah. So when we bought this machine, where it sits now is where the old one used to sit.
That's exactly where it was. I remember.
And so that one, the Vantech now, was in the middle of the floor. We took the old one apart, moved it out, and then put that one right back in its place. So if we could do it in another part of the shop and just clean it up and start over, we would definitely be a lot better off, and things would look a little different. But
you get a lot of work through there. You've got a nice process. I just know that there's a lot of hindsight that goes on after you get these things bolted to the floor and it'll power run to them.
Yeah, and at the time when we installed it, we weren't manufacturing. We didn't have an assembly line or production or anything like that. Production cell, I mean. It was just, like I said, we would machine parts, stack them on a cart, and move them out of the way. We didn't do the things we do now.
Do you guys, are you doing anything currently with inventory? I know that you're doing, you're purchasing and stuff like that, and I know you guys go through the shop and do a lot of inventory. Are you putting any thought toward, using scrap off fall, labeling? We have the ability to save scrap in the program and then reuse it in the optimization. I don't know if you're using that or not.
We are not.
Have you had any thoughts about that type of thing?
I guess we found that the guy operating the machine pretty much has a photographic memory, and he knows where he puts stuff, and we could obviously be much more efficient. We haven't gotten there yet.
But another one of our issues is a lot of our products are so deep that the scrap can't be used. It could be used for rails and maybe a door here and there, but we couldn't use scrap for other sides or backs, shelves. They just,
Your cabinets are 30 inches or more deep, aren't they? Yeah,
Yes.
so setting beverage units on it and all kinds of stuff.
We don't have that much usable scrap. I know what you're looking at back there. It looks like we do, but a lot of it is also job specific, where you might see white there, but on the other side is a piece of laminate that we'll probably never use again. We might pick it up and use it for a hidden wedge or something like that, but a lot of the scrap we use is just eventually will find its way to the dumpster because we can't use it on another project.
How about you, Tyler? Are you guys thinking about inventory control, scrap management, anything like that?
Ralph, I'd say it is one of the next steps, evolutions. When you're really running a production run, and you put a bunk of material on that router. For us, it feels like if we have to manually load something, we're taking too much valuable time. We actually would run that over at the saw and maybe process that on a vertical. But I would say yes, that's something that we will look into getting into, where if I believe it spits out a label for your scrap and then it's tracked in inventory. We do not currently do that.
I hear you. So either of you guys, I'm going to assume that you guys are on the server. You've got multiple users that use the program, and you're in the version it's SQL database driven. So I know that you guys are using a server. You've got a network going on. Are you sending, when you process to go to the machines, are you sending it to a destination on the folder on the server on the network, or are you sending it directly to the machine? Either one. You can go ahead, Tyler.
We're putting it on the server, and then that folder is pulled off the folder that's on the server.
That way the machine doesn't have to be up and running when engineers are working and processing something. It's good
Bingo.
practice.
Yep.
How about you, Brandon?
Same thing.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so is there anything you guys would like to add to the conversation about what we've covered so far? Do you have any questions you want to ask each other, or is there, Clay, do we have anything that we could answer that the audience is?
Yeah, there's been a couple questions come in. One of Linda was asking about the scrap management and whether or not they use it, but I think we covered that. That was pretty good. And so the latest one was, do you square off your scrap when it comes off the nesting machine? And so that is a feature that we have where we can automatically create that scrap part for you, create the label for it and square it up. And that way you can save it in your inventory and recall it when you need it. So that is something that's, that we have. And now there's a bunch of questions coming in, it looks like here.
Yeah, Linda, I wanted to say hi to Linda. Yeah, I remember Linda used to, I don't know if they got in their nesting machine in place yet or not, but she used to nest parts on a point-to-point. Yeah. And I mean, she went through that, and I know a lot of people, we've actually done that at Merchants when we had an odd-shaped part, jig it up in a certain way to keep them cutting your pods, But I just want to shout out to Linda and say, hey. But go ahead, Clay, you got another one?
Yeah, I was just reading some of these questions here. So it's talking about, is anyone using mortise and tenon construction or are you using dowel? So I don't think we got into that much about the machining options. I think the methods that you guys are using for your products.
Dowel construction for us.
Dowel construction.
Dowel here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was noticing that that Brandon was talking about wanting to use the 5mm dowel on drawer box construction. Mm-hmm. So, Tyler, are you using a lock dado or dowels, or what are you doing for drawer boxes?
We're using dowels. We are looking at we're looking at trying to get 1/2 inch out of our system and just go to 3/4 with the slide in back. Go to a 3/4 inch stretcher along the back of the cabinet, doweled in, and just to minimize quantities of materials. That would also allow us to go to dowel insertion on our drawer boxes.
You're going to get a better yield when you do that too, because those small drawer parts are going to fit into those blank spaces that are scrap right now. So that's a pretty good strategy.
Yeah. So we're looking at going that route too with our drawer boxes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so also to follow up here on David's question that he's asking here, he was wondering if you have specific dowel drilling stations. And I think, Tyler, I saw in your picture there that you've got the Omal machine and then Brandon, you were wishing you had one.
No, we do.
Oh, you have one as well?
Yeah.
Okay, great. You guys have very similar setups.
And they're very limited. Both of them are limited to the 8mm there. And I think Tyler's using the BHX to do the 5mm boring edges of the parts that he was talking about.
Yeah.
The question over there from David, I guess, is are you calling up the dialing program with a barcode? I believe we have standard dialing spacing, and so we use that unless it's a custom part, and that gets identified, you know, if there's a custom dialing program, that gets identified on there. I'm not sure how you guys, Brandon, are handling.
We do have a barcode and a little scanner.
Okay.
I've seen guys they'll have, for different size parts, they have the standard dialing like you're talking about, Tyler.
Yeah.
And they would print off a barcode of that particular program and tape it onto the machine and just scan it when they get a part that's a certain size.
Yeah.
We can help to accommodate that, or if you've got, you know, the parametric, you know, dialing as well, spacing. So, but yeah, that's a great thing. That way the guy's not searching in a folder for the right thing.
Right. Let's see here.
How many cabinets a day do you produce, Tyler? What's your throughput in a day?
You know, I answer that in a wider range. It's like 30 to 60 is that range of what our target is. You know, if it's just a wall cabinet, obviously that's going to be on the higher side versus talls or base cabinets with drawers.
What about you, Brandon? What's y'all's?
It's probably very similar. Like I said, we do a lot of retail, and a lot of those things are one-off, or they're custom, or they have like a extruded aluminum, you know, dual pole or something. So when we get into really highly custom stuff, it obviously will slow down. But if we were just to bang boxes together, it's probably on the 50 to 60 range. Yeah,
I'm reading Robert's questions in here, and he said his hesitation is the volume. And Robert, I've seen companies like Kiwani Scientific that had 4 beam saws lined up side by side, and then they had a couple of, I believe, nested base machines downline from that they were running side by side. I've seen, you know, a number of shops that would have multiple machines or machine lines that are set up. But I see what you're saying.
And I think Robert asked, does that include doors? If that's per or in regard to how many cabinets throughput? Yes, that's includes doors for us.
Right.
Same here.
So do you guys, do you machine your doors and stuff like that offline, or do you do your hinge cups and pulls online?
It's all nested.
All nested.
Nested.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. How often do you change your spool board? Linda wants to know.
Actually, it's depending. Probably about every 3 weeks or so. Maybe even a little longer, depending on the material and how thick we go through, how deep we go through the material. Some of it will go deeper. Doors, we try to go through a little deeper to keep the chipping down on the bottom side of the doors. But somewhere around the 3 week to a month mark.
So, Clay, I'm not sure I understand John's question. Come up with a way to handle sequence machine. You mean like?
I know exactly what he's talking about.
Okay, so
oh man, we ran into this a week ago. For AWI premium grade, you have to have the grain
sequence
match and everything. And one of our engineers tried to figure that out. I think someone at Microvellum helped him. I don't know if it's a toggle or a setting or something, but
yeah, it totally is.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a global actually, and there's what it is there's a code that's associated with the components that cause them to be aligned together in their proper position in the nesting sequence. So, yeah. Do you drill 35mm hinge cups in a nesting machine? Yes, you can drill them or you can route them, either one, Robert. Tracer wheel issue. Yeah. The tracer wheel. Talk about that.
Well, we've cut little fillers and we just drop them in there, feed them, and pull them back out.
Little pucks. You got a little box at the end of the edge band. You just dump them in there. When it's full, you take them back up, right?
Well, we basically The way edge bender runs, we run about 3 doors at a time, and when one door is done, you flip it over and take the pucks and put it in the next door, and kind of get you a rhythm, and you can go pretty smooth with them.
Yeah, there's actually a shoe that's out there instead of the guide wheel. There's a shoe that can be used on a lot of machines. It's an upgrade from the tracing wheel. Tyler, do you run into that kind of issue as well?
Oh yeah, that's one of the things you don't think about, but it's definitely one of the disadvantages of machining on there. So we ended up having to do a conversion kit on our bander, and it's not a new bander. It's a 10-year-old bander, but we ended up putting shoes where we needed them. I believe you can go where you can run the holes up or down. I think we just decided to do it where, if you just run the cups facing up all the time, you're fine.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there was a conversion we had to do on our bander.
That worked out pretty good for you, the shoe?
It did.
So Josh Milton, familiar name, wants to know if you guys post-lam the majority of your cabinets on the exposed laminate, or do you pre-lam before you route?
We pre-lam as much as we can.
A lot of labor in that post-lam stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Same here. We rarely post-laminate.
So when you guys, if you have a broken part, JW, there's a part moves on the nest and you have to remake it, how do you handle that? What do you do?
But if it's a part that needs actual machining in it, our operator he'll throw the part back up the board up there and kill the rest of the machining and rerun that one part. If not, we'll take it over to the saw and cut the part and do the necessary stuff by hand. If it's something simple, but necessary machining, we'll run another part.
It's pretty simple to pull it up in the interface on woodwop and knock out all the machining except for the piece you want, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you guys ever find yourself using that feature to move parts from one sheet to another before you actually get it out there in the shop? You guys ever do that?
No, we don't do that.
No, you just take it the way it comes and run it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes go ahead.
Well, most of the time, they've got pretty good layouts. Every now and then we'll get a sheet that has one part on it.
Yeah.
And we'll dig out some scrap and, cut it out of that if we can.
Right.
Yeah, you get into trouble, I think. I've seen where people would get in a habit that allow the guy at the machine to do his own thing. And there may be a piece of custom machining on a part. He doesn't know anything about it. It just looks like a standard side or something that's got a notch in it for a piece of equipment or whatever. And he doesn't have a clue that that's what's there, and he just runs his own programs. If you get in the habit of doing that, you're going to be remaking parts a lot. And sometimes it might mean that cabinet's got to come out of the field, come back to the shop, and be remade. Mr. Fushini, good to see you, Vince. So what kind of tooling do you use? Particular brand or type? I know that, and Vince, your question, a lot of people use a compression router for the border cuts. They use, down spirals and straight bits and things like that. But I'm guessing you're wanting to know about a type or a brand. Is that a question?
We 90% of the time we use a Vortex compression bit. I think it's a 3150 XP.
That's for your nest router?
That's for a nesting router. That's 90% of our cutting is done with the 1/2-inch compression.
Carbide tools?
Yep.
How about you, Tyler?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the specifics. I know we have done some switching around. We've tried some diamond. We've tried, just to see what kind of life we're getting out of different various tools. I think we've settled similar to what you guys are using there. And what are you guys seeing out of? I guess it depends if you're running laminate. We're seeing that you get the laminate tick mark in the bit there, so you're not getting as much versus if you just run melamine. So if anybody has any wonder router bits, let us know.
We're getting a pretty good life out of ours. Like I said, we've tried the diamond, and we also we've tried some different tooling, and my operator pretty much told me, nope, this is the one we got to use. And He's telling me he's getting anywhere with 150 to 200 sheets out of a bit sometimes.
And
Wow.
which one is that, Brandon?
Oh.
Or JP?
It's a Vortex compression bit. It's a 3150 XP, maybe 51 XP, but I know it's Vortex.
So I just want to plug something real fast while we're on this topic. We are working with Vortex right now on a live episode where we're going to be featuring tooling selection and tools to use in different operations and how you can kind of plug that in, you know, as far as the rotation speeds, the feed speeds, there's certain types of bits to use with certain operations, whether you're doing common line cutting versus just conventional nesting, you know, those types of things. So that is coming up soon. So if you guys want to make sure you jot that down, we'll be coming up here shortly with Vortex.
Cool. So I'm going to show my screen here real quick. Okay, so I'm going to, I went ahead, we've got about 8 minutes, it looks like. So I made a work order out of these products that you just saw. And it had quite a number of parts, and it was like four products. And what I did was I tried to use a strategy that we have in here to accommodate what both of these shops are doing right now. I had, well, actually, Brandon and them aren't doing as much as Tyler is, but for my saw, if I go to edit, you can see in the tool file that parts that had no machining or that have horizontal drilling. I made a set of rules, or checked the rules for that in my saw, so that if I apply the rules to a selection, it's going to attribute the saw to any part that has horizontal boring or no vertical machining. Okay, and then on the nest, there's rules that you can set up that parts that have face machining only. If it has face machining, it's going to go there. I should have said or horizontal, either one. And then the horizontal drilling is for edges only. And so when I did that and I selected all the components and I applied the rules for the individual machines that were selected, it actually checks off the right processing station for the individual part based on what its needs are. And in that way, I can send parts to the machines in an automatic way. There's another thing you can do is actually map the parts. You can assign a code that the program recognizes as being a specific machine's identification. And so I can go through my library and Library Designer and tell the connected that I'm outputting code to. And so another thing I can do as well is I can just select all of my machines that are in my processing station and put it out code to every single machine so somebody in the shop can decide where they want to run the components. That's a little more confusing, I think, but you know, typically if you have a strategy, you're going to settle on it and then use rules like this to get that done. So I just wanted to show you that we could actually accommodate having these different types of setups out in the shop, whether you've got two lines that are totally different or if we're doing a mix and a match. It's pretty easy to set up a scenario where we don't have to spend a ton of time trying to figure out how to get a part to a machine. In the old version of the program, we had to have a copy of the tool file XLS file inside the tool file folder for each thing we were going to run. And so with this, it's totally different. And then I have the IPP down here that I haven't tested yet. One of the things that Clay mentioned that I could show you is that there are some rules that we can set up now. The things as far as small part handling, double passes, that's that onion skin. And I can, you know, I have different selections. I can tell it to double pass all parts or to not do it. And so I can also put in tabs and I can tell it if I want to run phase 6 first. If on a nest, that's one of the things you run into if you get phase 6 machining. How do you reposition that small part? Brandon, what do you guys do? If you get phase 6 machining, you don't have your point-to-point anymore. How do you handle, do you have pins on your machine, locator pins on the corner?
Yes.
Good. I know some people buy the machines without the locator pins. And I know if you run into phase 6 machining, you're going to have a difficult time getting that part exactly where it needs to be, and it could cause alignment issues. Tyler, how about you? What do you guys do?
We run it through the vertical machining center.
Okay, so you'll do the nest, and then a phase 6 goes to the vertical machine, the BHX?
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah, we used to have a whole separate sticker that we would, one part would get 2 stickers with 2 barcodes so that, it could go over in the phase 6 machining. I think now that we've got it set up where it's 1 sticker and we're putting an identifier on there that it needs phase 6 machining, because you want to tell the operator, hey, put that in a separate run, separate path.
Right. Well, and that's awesome. And I've seen people for a long time, they'll do that. They'll keep their point to point to run phase 6 or to do stuff in another line out on the shop floor. But this is going to allow us to flip the sheet over on the downside on the part and do that machining, and then flip the entire sheet back over. But still, you need locator pins. I see we've got a pretty good question here. Josh is asking, JW, how does the laminate treat that bit that you're talking about? Does it put a groove in the bit?
It treats it like other bits. It does put a groove in it, not as deep as some of the other ones we've seen. Most of the time when we send it out to sharpen, it comes back pretty clean, and it does not last quite as long after it's been sharpened, but it still holds up pretty good. And we actually have Vortex sharpen them for us too, and they'll call us if they don't think it's any good to be sharpened anymore. So it does hold up pretty good.
Let me ask one more. We've got just a second, I think. Maybe I'm going to try to squeeze in one more question. What do you guys do if you snap a bit in the middle of the nest? What do you do?
We've only had that happen once, and we pretty much had to just back out and we started all over. The board didn't move, just a bit.
All right, but you had a bit. Was a bit sharpened that was in there? How do you make sure that you've got the same diameter bit going back if you sharpen your tools?
Well, you have to tell it. You put into the diameter bit. We've got 8 or 10 bits there, and he'll get the closest one to what he had in the machine.
Yeah, what I want to submit to you is, when we put the nest together in the program, it separates the parts. And if you're using true shape nest, it won't matter if common line cutting. If you're not using common line cutting, you'll be okay. So, are we out of time?
No, we can keep going. I mean, not too much longer. I don't want to take too much of everyone's time, but if you've got a few more points here, that'd be great.
Well, I just want to thank Tyler and JW and Brandon for joining us, and I really appreciate you guys' input. You work at it every day. You've got the experience. You're the one that's facing it, and people out there making decisions. And I think this is helpful.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to join us here.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
So, do we want to answer questions or what?
I think there's a few more here that we could answer via the chat. Just want to make sure that's a really important part of these episodes here, that we get these questions answered. And I think some of these we can answer and let Tyler and the guys from Merchants go. So, all right. So on behalf of Microvellum and everyone helping out behind the scenes, I'd like to thank you for attending. A special thanks out to Merchants Fixtures and Strata Design for joining us today. And until next time, we'll catch you on our next Microvellum live event.